Welcome everybody, and thank you for joining us today, where we will share with you some of the key learnings from our recent study as part of our global barometer into consumer behaviour and how current pressures are influencing how consumers shop and the decisions that they're making. My name's Lucia. I head up the UK research team, and I'll be sharing with you the insights from today. Any local questions, any specifics as we're going through, please put it in the chat and we'll do our best to answer those questions at the end of today's session. Thank you. By way of introduction, for anybody who's less familiar with Toluna and who we are and what we do, we're essentially an organisation about bringing customer insight to the heart of any organisation. We kind of fuse the best parts of research technology to bring agility, to bring quality, and put it straight at the fingertips of our clients. We have access to over 40 million people across 70 different countries with our panelists, and then we fuse all of that together with our own in-house expertise and service, which essentially is any research to support, any design, any kind of strategic thinking in terms of what does data mean, how can we do things smarter and quicker using our technology to help enable your business to make the right decisions for your organisation in a timely way. We do all of that using our Toluna Start platform, which is the research industry's first end-to-end real-time consumer insight platform. And we bring together lots of different research approaches and methodologies across markets throughout the world to really answer questions that are key either on your brand or understanding consumer behaviour. It can be new product development, or it could be brands and comms related as well. So we offer all of that at scale. Access is always on, depending on where you are in the world. You can always launch a survey into a market. The platform is designed really to help teams collaborate and share data with each other in a very simple and seamless way. And we put quality at the heart of everything we do with built-in quality checks, automation, making sure the respondents are genuine, and assessing kind of the quality of our respondents in real time. So really, that's a little intro into who we are and some of the brands that we work with around the world who trust us to bring insights to their business on a daily basis. The focus of today is very much around understanding consumers in today's market. And we all know that the global landscape is really changing so quickly at the moment, and it really makes it more and more important for us to understand the evolving needs of our consumers. We see a lot of financial pressure, there's a lot of political instability, and they are continuing to influence how consumers think. And therefore, as customer-centric organisations, you need to keep insight at the front of any decision making to make sure that everything that you're doing has the consumer at the heart of where the business is going. So really, with that as a backdrop, we field this barometer to really better understand consumer changes as they're happening. This is actually the 20th wave of this consumer barometer. We started it just as the coronavirus pandemic started to really listen to what consumers around the world were telling us, and we have evolved it to reflect what's happening now and the current economic and political challenges. In terms of the countries that we covered, you can see there are 16 markets this wave, covering all the different continents around the world. Typically a nationally representative audience, weighted to be representative, and 1,000 interviews in most markets. There are a few which have got 500. So what we're going to look at today is the consolidated results for the global study. And for anybody who wants more specific local context, please get in touch with us or your Toluna contact, and they will be more than happy to share with you any more specific insights that you need about your markets of interest. So really, let's get started with a summary. And if we start with some quite macro themes, and these are things that we've been looking at for the past 20 waves. We ask people how happy they are with their lives right now, and we are seeing satisfaction with life improving. So despite some of the financial pressures that we're all experiencing right now, actually versus a year ago, we have seen a 5-point increase in life satisfaction. We do, however, see low consumer spend confidence, and that is around a quarter of people globally confident spending money, and that has declined. So even though people are satisfied with their life and that's seeing an improvement, we are seeing spend confidence start to go backwards compared to this time last year. We do see 4 in 10 people saying they've got less money now than before the pandemic. So over that kind of quite long period now, still 4 in 10 people who are less well off. So there's a real strong, financial consideration with all business decisions in terms of how people are feeling in those markets. But there is also, in the backdrop of that, a level of optimism. We do see optimism globally continue to be reasonably high at 40% of people globally feeling optimistic. But when you contrast that around the various markets, it's Europe where it is lowest. And we will dig into that a little bit deeper as well. But we're going to see some quite different global patterns across the continents as we go through today's webinar, with Europe standing out actually in lots of different levels to feel quite differently to some of the other areas of the world. When we look at the impact of the rise in the cost of living, globally, we see kind of 3 big buckets of consumer concern. So rising energy and living costs are impacting 7 in 10 people around the world. It's an enormous number. We see 4 in 10 people expecting to spend more on groceries in the coming months. And we see 8 in 10 people noticing price increases on fresh food specifically. We see a lot more evidence of people doing savvy shopping. So consumers are really saying that they're going to reduce unnecessary purchases. They're going to do more price comparisons, and they're going to shop around more to get the value that they're looking for. When we ask people what they're going to be spending less on, we see social activities being the #1 area where people are going to cut back, and that really is eating out, going on holiday abroad, and ordering takeout food as well. They are some of the key areas where people are pulling back their spend. We also see the impact of the supply chain and global events and how they're impacting the consumer experience. People are already experiencing issues with increased prices, but alongside that, availability of products. And they're seeing that in-store and online, noticing it more actually in-store than online, but really the availability of products is certainly being noticed by consumers. And that is frustrating for half of people around the world, that product availability issues are impacting them. We'll look a little bit deeper into the relationship between online and in-store shopping and the impact that stock availability is having. But really, what we see is people actually saying they will switch to in-store shopping and do less online shopping because of product availability. And we interpret that as being that when people are in store, they can make some more informed choices, and if a product that they're looking for isn't in stock, and they can seek out appropriately alternatives for the product they were hoping for. We see people being impacted by availability insofar as them taking their shopping elsewhere. They are stocking up when an item does come back into stock. And we also see people experimenting with either different product types, that could be different brands, different formats, different kind of combinations to replace the product they'd originally been expecting to buy. The other macro theme that we will look at today is how the current economic situation is impacting consumer health and well-being. There's been an enormous focus on health and well-being since the start of the pandemic, and I think importantly now what's happening and what we're seeing coming through in the data is the impact of this financial burden that people are experiencing impacting their well-being. So we have a third of people saying they're experiencing higher stress levels due to the higher cost of living, and people just generally feeling more stress. Nearly half of people saying that the rising cost of living is impacting their health and their well-being, and that could be in lots of different ways, in terms of their emotional well-being, their physical well-being, their ability to take care of themselves. We see a quarter of people expect to spend more money in this current financial climate on things like vitamins, supplements, general healthcare needs, personal care and hygiene. So not only obviously is there some financial burdens for people to take, but the impact on health and well-being is certainly noticed in the latest wave of the barometer. So that was the summary really of the topics that we're going to cover today, and we'll go now into a little bit more detail, starting with consumer confidence. So in terms of consumer confidence, I mentioned earlier that life satisfaction has improved 5 points compared to this time last year. And we do see almost half of people saying that they feel satisfied with their life. It is higher in the Americas, and higher again in China and in Saudi Arabia, but the lowest score you can see here is in Europe. So actually it is being impacted the most in European markets. We also see optimism as being high in some regions, but again, lowest in Europe and declining. So globally, the score is 4 in 10 people feeling optimistic about the future. That is less than 30% in Europe and in decline. We see the Americas being high and reasonably stable, but we are seeing a decline also in APAC and MENA. But again, Saudi and China stand out as being higher compared to the other markets that we covered. But against the backdrop of optimism and life satisfaction, we are seeing consumers being cautious with their finances. So we touched on this earlier, where we're saying actually there's a level of positivity and optimism, but this isn't translating into people spending without consideration for their finances and for what may happen in the future as well. So we see around a quarter of people globally being very confident spending money over the coming months. It's a little bit higher in the Americas, but it is only 16% in Europe, which is an incredibly low number. And I think quite a stark warning sign for all the markets, all the brands, all the organisations servicing the European markets. And we can see that it has declined globally since last year. We asked people about their personal financial circumstances, and what we're seeing really is almost half, so 46% of people have less money now than they did before the pandemic. But now, if we look forwards to the next 3 months, we are seeing 30% of people expecting their finances to worsen in the coming months. So again, some quite strong figures in terms of financial caution. I wanted to also share this with you, which is the long-term view of some of the data that we've been tracking going right back almost 2 years ago now, really, where we asked people about their concern with their personal financial security. That's the red line. And you can see that around 4 in 10 people at the beginning were concerned about their personal financial security, and that's dropped down and dropped down. But now it's started to peak, and we're now back in a position that we were right at the start of the kind of toughest part of the pandemic. The green line is the proportion of people spending money, who are confident to spend their money. And again, we're seeing some upsides there for some people who are starting to feel, a little bit more optimistic. But again, in the backdrop of how regionally different we are seeing those trends come through. Most people, I'm sure, will be unsurprised to see that the place people are expecting to spend more money is utility bills. So the dark blue line is the latest wave. And we've only got really the 3 latest waves on here, but even compared to 2 waves ago, so just earlier this year, the utility bills, half of people expecting to spend more on their utility bills. And that's compared to a third of people earlier on this year. So the impact of energy crisis is really hitting home now, with so many consumers. We also see people expecting to spend more on things like healthcare, personal care and hygiene. And what you're also now seeing is a bit of a pullback on things like going out to eat, where that is now shrinking compared to it was in the previous wave. If we look at that data again, trended over time, if you go back to the beginning, the green line is utility bills, and this is a proportion of people who expect to spend more on their utility bills. You can see back when we first started to ask this question, it was close to around a quarter of people who expected to spend more on their utility bills. And then if you look back to the last 3 or 4 waves, you can see the dramatic increase in that level of spend. I mean, it's not comparable to any of the other big buckets of spend that we're seeing for people. Really, it stands out. Utility bills are seeing the sharpest rise in the past couple of waves. So that was kind of the macro picture. We're now going to dig a little bit more into the supply chain. So looking specifically now at how supply chain issues are impacting shopper behaviour. What we're seeing here is that there's a real difference in the in-store shopper experience versus the online shopper experience. In store, people seem to be more aware of an increase in prices and an increase in out of stocks. What you've got here is in-store shopping versus online shopping, and you can see 56% of people are experiencing increased prices in store, and that's compared to 40% of people who see that when they're shopping online. And the same for out of stocks, which is the next one. So 37% of people are experiencing out of stocks when shopping in store, and that's just less than 30%, 29% there for online shopping. So there's a real difference in what people are seeing and experiencing depending on the channel that they're shopping in. And I think that poses some really interesting challenges for brands and for retailers in terms of how can they make the shopper experience better in store to kind of negate some of these experiences that shoppers are telling us they're having. But interestingly, what we also see is a switch between online to in-store. So we see 6 in 10 people are willing to switch to in-store shopping because a product or brand isn't available online. And I think that really is suggesting to us that people think if I'm in store, I can find those products easier, the alternative to what I had intended. So I think as supply chain issues worsen, and availability becomes more of a problem, people might start going more in store to find the alternatives if they're struggling to find what they need online. We asked people what they would do if their product wasn't available, the product that they usually would buy, and the green bar is telling us that most people will substitute or find an alternative. The other option really is the light blue line, which is people trying to buy from another store. There are a few people who say they'll wait for it to become available, but really swapping for an alternative brand or retailer switching are the two key behaviours that we're seeing people switch towards. The impact of out of stocks is frustrating for people. You see about half of consumers telling us that they are frustrated at availability issues when it comes to their shopping. But actually what we're also seeing when we compare it even just to last wave is that this situation is worsening. So we asked people how long they expect availability of products to be a problem. And actually you can see people now with the dark blue line telling us that they expect this to worsen and actually continue to be a problem for the next 6 to 12 months or longer. So that was everything we wanted to share with you about availability and the impacts that that has on shopper behaviour. The next topic now, we'll dig more into the impact of the rising cost of living on consumer spends. So we saw earlier that people were feeling the impact of the energy crisis and the rising cost of living on their spending. And what we're seeing really is how that's increased. It was 55% back in wave 18 at the start of this year, and now it's gone up to nearly 7 in 10 people. And it's actually higher in some markets that we've highlighted here. So Singapore, the UAE, the UK and Brazil are feeling that strongest. Unsurprisingly, people are taking some sensible steps to try to reduce the impact of the increase in utilities by doing things like turning the lights off, reducing the temperature of their heating, doing their laundry at low tariff hours, investing in smart solutions to reduce waste, using eco or cold washers on their washing machines or the dishwashers, and reducing the time that they spend in the shower as well. So it's lots of practical ways in which people are trying to just minimise that impact as much as they can. I think of concern is a figure that we're looking at here now around big ticket items. So nearly 6 in 10 people are telling us that now is not the time to spend on big ticket items. So if you're a retailer or a brand in any of those kind of larger spending areas, you know, now is clearly a challenging time in terms of comms, messaging, kind of trying to drive some confidence from consumers and offer them smarter, more of a higher value driven solutions to bring them still into your brands and into your stores. We see that higher in Brazil, and we see that slightly higher as well across Europe. We asked people what they expect to spend less on, and 4 in 10 people are saying eating out is by far the area most impacted by the cost of living crisis, people spending less, but also an impact on holidays, on clothing, on electrical goods. So again, linking into this kind of idea of the big ticket items being held back, that this is where we're seeing people tell us that they will spend less in the next 3 months. We continue to see a real focus on the price increases across fresh food. We've seen it have lots of coverage globally in terms of cost increases and ingredients and shipping, etc. And so 8 in 10 people are seeing price increases across fresh food. And again, it's up a little bit since earlier this year. So when we ask people how they're going to manage those cost of living increases in the next 3 months, people tell us they're going to cut back on unnecessary purchases, they're going to shop around, they're going to switch to own label, they're going to do more price comparisons, they might change supermarkets to find cheaper alternatives, and they might also shop more regularly, little and often, to get better deals and to avoid waste as well. Here we're looking at what people will be more likely to give up. We've touched already on eating out, going on holiday, takeaways, going to pubs and bars, and also purchasing premium brands. So these are all areas where people tell us that they are going to spend less. So these are the things that they're going to give up. And then at the bottom in purple, these are the things which people are not willing to give up for the short term at least. So mobile phones, TV subscriptions, sports and fitness activities, etc. So there's a few areas there where people right now are telling us that those areas will be less impacted than things that we saw at the top here in terms of eating out and holidays, etc. That was kind of the area that we were going to look at cost of living and how people's spends might change. The next bit we will focus on is consumer health and well-being, which is being adversely impacted by all the pressures of the financial crisis. Um, Half of people are telling us that the rising cost of living is impacting their health and well-being. And you can see to the right some of the countries where that is strong. There's a lot of Asian, Middle East markets, but also Latin America as well, where people are feeling the impact on their health and well-being. People are feeling more stressed because they need to prioritize other areas rather than their own health and well-being. People are getting less exercise, they're less health conscious because they have other priorities, they're buying less products to support their health, or they might be eating less healthily, and that might be linked again to financial pressures when it comes to fresh food particularly. People are expecting to spend more on some areas of health and wellness in the next few months, and that includes supplements, it includes healthcare itself, it includes things like medical insurance, medication, personal care, toiletries, hygiene products, but also fitness, sport and exercise. So even though we focus largely on cost of living in terms of energy and in terms of food, there's a lot of areas that impact our health and well-being that people are also feeling the financial pressures from as well. The last section that we're going to look at, for anybody who's been to one of these webinars before, we often talk about social responsibility, brand values, social and environmental type topics. And we've been covering this in our global barometer for quite a long time now. And I think it's interesting now in the backdrop of financial pressures, whether more of a sustainability thinking is starting to ebb away, or whether people are still finding it important that brands are socially responsible. So let's take a look at that. So in terms of brand values, consumers are still thinking about the values of the brands they buy. People are still holding brands accountable and think that brands should engage with consumer values as well. People are saying they will still look for these brands and that they still think it's important to invest time into the decisions that we all make as consumers in the brands that we choose. We still see people talking about positive environmental and social messaging being important, but a lot of people are telling us they still don't have enough information to make informed choices, but they want to know more and they would act accordingly for brands that are not in line with their social kind of ethics and corporate responsibility. We see 3 in 4 people tell us it's important to them as consumers to take time and make the right decisions when it comes to choosing brands. We see people telling us they still want to be informed about values and ethics, and we want to engage with brands that align with their own values. We see 6 in 10 people saying they would start using a brand because of a positive social or environmental stance, but we are seeing that decline. So at the bottom, what we're seeing now is that's dropped nearly 8 points. So as price and value pressures are increasing, we are seeing the impact and the switching to more socially responsible brands start to ebb away slightly. Still a high number at 6 in 10, but it is still something that consumers are now potentially starting to trade off in their minds a little bit. We also see a decline in this measure, which is how many people would stop using a brand because of any negative environmental and social activities. So it now stands at around 6 in 10, but it has dropped nearly 10 points since last wave. So again, just some slightly worrying indicators here that as people are becoming more financially pressured, their focus has moved away from some of the more socially responsible messaging that brands have been focused on. We asked consumers what was most important to them for brands to do, and being sincere and authentic in what you do is really important to consumers. A continued commitment to reducing the amount of packaging and plastic, etc., and also having policies that benefit the environment and society. So I think it will be interesting to see whether those numbers start to stabilise in the next wave of this, and whether this continued focus of value and financial kind of constraints continues to impact some of the more ethical decision making that may have been top of mind even 6 months ago. So to wrap up, the 4 key themes really that we've looked at today. We looked at consumer confidence remaining low, with 4 in 10 people having less money. We see the impact of product availability impacting shopper behaviour. We see rising energy and living costs dramatically impacting how consumers spend. We also see human health and well-being feeling the impact of current economics, and that couples totally with brand sustainability, brand values, and some of the more ethical choices that people might make. So that was everything we wanted to share with you today. And just to wrap up, I wanted to share a final slide really around some of the work that we've been doing with our clients globally around rapidly responding to what's happening in today's market. And we've developed some templated surveys on our platform for all of our clients to use as can be adapted for any category really. So we've put in place some surveys around rapid price checking to help shape your pricing strategy. We've got like a deep dive on the impact of inflation on consumer behaviour for your product or service area. We've developed an environmental and social reputation quick survey, which is all around brand choice and the drivers there. We've got a specific one around supply chain, which we've covered a lot. So all of those things are in place to be launched very quickly within 24 hours, so you can quickly make decisions as organisations, saving you money, saving you time, but also allowing you to repivot your business, your messaging, your comms, as businesses have had to do so many times in the past 2 years to adapt to what's been happening globally. So if anybody is interested in any of those, please get in touch and we'll be happy to show you what they look like. So really now that brings us to the end of today's webinar. Thank you all for your time. Do you have any questions? Let's take a look now at the questions that have come up in the live meeting chat as we've been presenting. Thank you for your time.